So I am going to go ahead and pass this on so they can get to talking. And I'm going to pass this on over to Rodger Blaker with BlakerBusinessCoaching.com. And welcome. And how you feeling? You know, you had all those bumps and bruises and falling off the horse.
That's the thing.
Falling off the horse.
Better this week, yeah. So it's 3.5 weeks, so it's starting to healing is taking hold.
Okay,
so.
Well, you know, you look none worse for wear, so I'm going to hand this over to you and let you talk to Steve, and I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you for returning, Steve, and I'll follow up when y'all get through. So
thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, again, it's Rodger Blaker. I'm going to host this part of the show, and I want to welcome back Steve Bruneman. Welcome back, Steve.
Thank you.
He was here 2 weeks ago, and now, as you heard Kathy say, he's been a family attorney, practicing family law for 30 years here in Dallas, but he really has this passion for something else that he does, and that's what we're talking about. He does a workshop on weekends, relationship, reality, and how to avoid divorce. And we got into a very good discussion last time, and just to me like just hit the tip of the iceberg. So what we want to do is continue this week with the discussion and just let him dive into more details of the things that he teaches and also share a lot of his experiences from these things. So and last time, Steve, you talked about behavior as when I asked you the question, what is probably the most primary thing that comes up, and you talked about that some. But I'd like for you just to continue and just go down the path of other things that you get into that you've learned and teach people how to better have better success in a relationship, knowing ahead of time some of these things that you have learned and you teach. So why don't you step in and we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you, Rodger. Thanks for having me back, Kathy and Rodger. I always start out emphasizing and overemphasizing the need for education. And what form, people say, well, what do you mean education? It takes any form, church, DVDs, CDs, books, workshops, seminars. It's something that we do in every other area of our life except relationships. And in my opinion, that's why we're failing so miserably, because we don't educate ourselves on relationships. We can be the most educated person in the world, in school, in our professions, in hobbies, but not in our relationships. So I overemphasize that always. So within that context, people ask me, what are the top 3 things? What can you do? What can I do to make my relationship better? Mm-hmm. Number one, I ask people, I say, what is love without kindness? I'm a divorce lawyer. I see people in my office who are obviously in a broken marriage. And more times than not, they're complaining about how mean their spouse is, how nasty their spouse is, et cetera, et cetera. So generally, I think we are not as kind to each other as we should be. Who wants to live with someone who's unkind? Is there love without kindness? I don't think there is. If you're mean and nasty to your spouse, who wants to be married to a mean and nasty person? And so that, of course, comes back to behavior. You have to look at your behavior. A client the other day, and he said that his wife thinks he comes home grumpy from work, and he didn't agree with that. And I said, well, if she thinks it and she's saying it, then she really feels that. So you have to look at yourself and see what you're doing. What's your behavior that makes her believe that? It's funny because in a former relationship of mine, I'd raise my voice when I get excited, and I would be accused of yelling. Well, to me, it wasn't yelling. I was just raising my voice because I was excited. So there's always that difference of perception. Yeah. Sure. So, but we have to be aware of what our spouse is feeling, and then look at what we're doing. And even if we don't agree with it, if they're feeling it, Rodger,
it's their reality.
It's real,
right, to them.
So then the question becomes, what do we do about it? If it's really important to us to make them feel better, and then we have to look at ourselves and our behavior, and we have to make changes. We have to grow.
Right. You know, it's something you said about kindness, and I don't want to spend all the time just peeling back layers of one subject. You're talking about somebody could be grumpy or whatever. To me, it's not a matter even necessarily doing something negative. It could be that we just don't take action to even do kind things. It's almost like neutral. So that could be all kinds of layers. It doesn't mean we have to be mean. It could be just we're kind of avoid, or you and I were talking earlier, kind of like a couch potato, not really participating. That's unkind without being mean. I mean, is that
Sure. I had one lady who said, all I wanted was my husband to hold my hand.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted. And he wouldn't. He just couldn't make himself hold her hand. Well, touch in a relationship is so important. We know that. And so this woman was starved, and not in the common sense that you would think would be so detrimental to their relationship, but to her it was. And that's an easy thing for him to have done. He was uncomfortable doing it,
Right.
but he could have taught himself and trained himself to do that, but he didn't. So there you go.
You know, something that you and I were talking about a bit earlier too, that when you think about holding hand, that sounds like such a minor thing, just to hear words like that. But I guarantee you, anybody listening to the program that touch is really significant, they'll tell you that's huge. And we think about why would that? But to me, you and I were talking earlier that sometimes these minor, small things end up being huge because they build up. So
Sure.
some of the examples of that kind of a thing can happen too, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
that holding hand leads to a lot of other issues, but that just gives you an indication there's something broken there.
Most of the common things that I hear every day in my office are simple. They're simple. They're easily
They're fixable,
remedied
right?
if we're aware of them, and if we're aware of them. That's the biggest thing. Is we have needs. We all have needs, and there are books on that. His needs, her needs. I mean, they list them, and most female needs are different from male needs. So we prioritize our needs differently. But I ask people, I say, do you know what your spouse's top need is, or list 5 or 3 or 2? And they look at me with this blank stare.
Right.
They don't know what I'm talking about. So consequently, if you don't even know what your spouse's needs are, how are you going to help meet them? You can't. And how do we learn? Through talking, through asking questions, through communication. And most what I see, the conflict in the marriages, it all boils down to needs not being met. And that's why people leave their
Unmet
marriages.
needs. I've heard that term over and over.
They leave their marriages because they
Right.
think their needs can be better met somewhere else. But what I tell people is, certainly, if you don't learn new techniques about relationships, if you don't understand the failings of your last relationship, you're going to repeat them in the next relationship.
Right.
So it's not you, it's not your spouse, it's how you deal with the relationship. And the only way you can do that is to get educated and to learn new tricks.
Well, something you were saying there, doing this process of these workshops, I take it that you have situations occur where you may even help an individual in a couple dynamics how to communicate either a feeling or a question. I mean, do you sometimes have to really coach them through how to even word something? Because a lot of times somebody, the intention I've experienced with people is it can be so intense with them, they have such fear even stating something or asking for something, they'll come out almost confrontational. As opposed to, I mean, do you help? Does that come up, and do you help people in that area? Or
No, again, I'm an attorney. I'm not a PhD. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I'm a lawyer. So what I do is I convey information. I convey ideas. I dwell on this stuff. I talk to people every day. Doctors and just in any insurance people, financial people, builders, and we talk about things really obvious, and they look at me and they smile and they say, I never thought about that.
Right.
And I say, well, of course you didn't. It's not your job to think about that. I think about it because I deal with marriage and failed marriages every day. And so I think about this stuff all the time. And as a consequence, I've created theories and ideas, and that's what I convey.
Okay.
So I don't do counseling per se. I create and I convey ideas which help people think about their relationships a little bit differently. And they go, wow, I never thought about that, or that's a great idea. And a lot of what I say could be just a reminder of things that you've forgotten.
It's almost common sense stuff, but like you say, sometimes we just quit thinking about it.
Rodger, you know, it's all common sense.
Right.
Relationships are not brain surgery, but the simple things are typically, we don't do them.
Right.
And if you don't do certain simple things in a relationship, you're existing and your spouse is existing, and you're doing your thing and she or he is doing their thing, and you're never together. I talked to counseled a client the other day, and he said, when we go on vacation, I like to go to the beach, and I like to sit up at the resort and just have a drink and read the paper. And my wife likes to be on the beach and read or whatever. And I said, well, you know what? You know what you've just described? You've described a situation where you're separated. You're on vacation and you're separated. People separate within their homes long before they ever separate outside their homes. So what I tell people is evaluate your circumstances in your house and look at your daily habits, your routines, your lifestyle, and figure out if you're really together or if you're really separated.
Right.
And you'd be amazed at how many people are truly separated and they don't even know it.
Right.
They don't recognize it or realize it. And once you make them aware, that's just an example of how simple things can be. The ideas, that's a simple idea, but people don't think about it.
Right.
I heard
it's almost like you have a checklist for them to ask these questions, and if you have so many no's, it's indicating you're not connecting.
Right. I mean, but it's a matter of helping people pause in their life for a day, for an hour. In my seminars a day, so they pause for 8 hours, and they think. And they evaluate, and I give them ideas of things to think about.
Right.
And then they can meet as a couple and take time and talk about it and go, wow, I didn't realize that we didn't realize we're doing these things. And more importantly, people don't appreciate the long-term effect, Rodger, of what they're doing. So if you're
the damage,
and I always give this example. Everybody that knows me knows this example. The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. Where are they today? They're gone. How strong and how formidable and how powerful were those twin towers? I mean, they were a symbol of strength, of financial strength around the world, but just the physical strength. Oh my God, they're 110 stories each, steel and concrete, blah blah blah. Well, they're gone today. They failed. They failed. And so I compare that to what bonds us as couples in a relationship. Well, love and friendship and all that stuff, but you can't see that. That's invisible.